My guest today is none other than Allan Savory, a man who once despised livestock to now being a fierce believer in the role of livestock to our planet.
Without livestock, we cannot save civilization as it is today. And I would defy any scientist in the world to tell me where I'm wrong.
Today we hear the backstory of what fuels his life's work and passion for helping ranchers through holistic management. Through his beliefs and stances on land management, climate change, and other issues, well, he's managed to frustrate both the extreme environmentalists as well as some in our ranching community. So if you're good with status quo thinking, well, this show's not going to be for you. But if you want your ideas to be challenged, listen in today and follow the upcoming shows as well as I share with you my conversation with Allan Savory on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hi, everyone. This is the Working Ranch Radio Show. Justin Mills here, your host, and we're glad to have you tuned in and riding along with us for today's program. If this is your first time listening to the Working Ranch Radio Show, we hope you enjoy the program and glad to have you along. And if you missed something in today's show, you can go find a recorded version of it by our podcast site at workingranchradio.com. Or if you have your own preferred podcast provider, you can do that. Make sure you subscribe as well so you always know when a new show comes out that we kick out every Saturday, and we hope you enjoy that. And by the way, if you do enjoy the program, leave us a rating or a review, pass along to a friend. All of that is very much appreciated. Be sure to tune in through the rest of the program later on. The Captain Tim O'Byrne, editor of Working Ranch Magazine, will be in for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents. We'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at long-term weather. He's saying middle of February, not looking good for a lot of us here in the lower 48 and in Canada as well, so tune in for that. And how many of you had some questions or been hearing a little bit about Ambrook, an accounting or bookkeeping software designed specifically with agriculture in mind? Well, today, Mackenzie Burnett, CEO and co-founder of Ambrook, will be joining us later on in the show as well. Now, before we get into our featured guest here today, I want to mention an upcoming event because it somewhat ties into our guest, and that is the 78th annual meeting of the Society for Range Management that's coming up this month, February 9th through the 13th in Spokane, Washington. Now, one of the highlight events will be the 2025 Producers Forum. Some of the guests that will be there in hand will be John Lundgren, Alejandro Carrillo, and then joining via Zoom for question and answer period will be Allan Savory, who of course is our guest here today. Dave Voth, who is part of the Good Grazing Makes Sense initiative with SRM, was kind enough to help me set up an interview with Allan Savory, which is what we're sharing a portion of that today. Now, keep in mind, this interview that I was able to sit down and have with Allan is over an hour and a half conversation. We're not going to get into all of that today, but we will be sharing parts of that conversation in future upcoming Working Ranch Radio shows. So be sure to continue to tune in for that. But one of the things, of course, as we all know with Allan Savory, there's folks in our industry that have totally embraced what he has been saying for many, many years, as you'll hear about today. There's others that are a little bit skeptical of that. I realize that, understand that. Nevertheless, I think the interview here today will be something, if you'll take the time to listen to it with openness and understanding, I think you'll pull something out of it that will be extremely beneficial to your ranching operations. So with that, let's join our conversation as we sit down today with Allan Savory, founder of Savory Global and developer of Holistic Management, my guest this week on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Allan, good to have you on our program today.
Thank you, Justin.
Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation today from a lot of different things, and we'll get into really some of the work that you've done over the many, many years. But I think really, as you and I talked prior to going on air here, we wanted to get to the heart of what's really been behind a lot of your push for the many, many years. And it really started years ago with your realization that we continue to see a desertification happening across the globe and the concern in that. And that's really what started your initial push that then we'll get into some other things that created that we're seeing in our ranching industry here today. But talk about that initial first element that was the concern that you had many years ago.
Yes, and because all these things are time constrained, I'll cut through a lot of fancy stuff. I am writing a memoir to explain why the ability to deal with what is called climate change could only have developed at one time in history in the circumstances that it did. That's what we'll talk about today. So that began 1950s with me as a very young ecologist. I was incredibly antagonistic to livestock, as are environmentalists and people have been for 10,000 years, for causing environmental degradation that we call desertification, because ultimately over the seasonal rainfall environments of the world, places like Arizona, etc., but not places like France, it leads to a desert. And then I was working with one of the world's top ecologists and top American scientists in Africa. And we were all working to replace livestock with wildlife, what people are calling rewilding today, because we firmly believed as scientists we could stop the problem that way. Then I discovered that I was wrong, being completely wrong. I talk about that in the TED Talk, and that, in fact, without livestock, we cannot save civilization as it is today. So here we have one of the most vilified things, livestock, and without it, and I would defy any scientist in the world to tell me where I'm wrong. None have in over 50 years. We cannot solve it without them. So that's why it's so terribly important. And that you touched on, what is called climate change is really environmental degradation change. And it began with biodiversity loss. And without that occurring, desertification couldn't occur. And desertification was destroying civilizations 10,000 years ago. And we can read ancient texts blaming the pastoralists for too many sheep for causing the deserts that the sands were overwhelming cities. Beijing today, and some days can have hundreds, thousands of tons of sand dumped on it, just like we were having 10,000 years ago. That was blamed on livestock. Now, biodiversity loss, desertification, leads to mega fires increasing as they're doing. And then as a consequence of these and fossil fuels, not just fossil fuels, the climate is being accelerated. Climate change has always occurred, but is being accelerated by humans. And we will not adapt to that any more than the frog in slowly boiled water. We have to jump out of the water. And we're not doing it. We're talking about mitigating it. We're blaming livestock. I don't want to go into all that. Mm-hmm. It'll come out, I'm sure. Yeah. But I cannot think of any issue, economic, security, any issue, more important than the survival of civilization, city-based civilization today. And I repeat, it is simply not possible, as I learned in the 1960s, without livestock.
Mm-hmm. So we'll get into that a little bit more, Allan, as far as because I think there's definitely, the group and the audience that we're going to be talking to today will be in 100% agreement that livestock can be a method of reversing that or dealing with that. I want to dial this into a little closer range here into North America. And in your view, what are the areas in North America that you see this happening on an extreme basis or a faster than normal basis where we're not dealing with it?
I could just correct one thing. You said we'll get into, and many people believe livestock can be.
Ranchers would believe that.
Yes, and it goes beyond can be. Nothing else can do it. I would say livestock are essential. Now, where is the worst desertification occurring in the United States? It's in Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, parts of Colorado. It extends up in almost to Canada. And in the TED Talk, I showed it's largely the brown areas in the world. So you can totally overgraze every plant. You can do it for centuries. You can totally overstock to ridiculous levels. And in humid environments, nature fills the vacuum. Desertification doesn't occur around London, Washington, blah, blah, blah. Now, other areas of the world, you can do everything you like in the world, like Mexico, etc. And as you see, even national parks are appalling cases of desertification. Southern California, New Mexico, etc. Utah. So these are the areas. It's where the rainfall is very seasonal, and you get long periods of dryness in the year. It's not high or low rainfall, although many of those are low. But if you go to the Middle East, Yemen, North Yemen, etc., some areas are 50-inch rainfall, and yet they're deserts today.
Mm-hmm. Allan, how do you deal with the conversation that would come up that say, especially in those more arid climates that just literally do not have the moisture volume that you had mentioned the humid environments have that can automatically kind of self-heal to some extent? And then my question is this: can it physically be changed? Those arid climates that say you're getting 6 to 8 inches of rainfall per year, can those areas be fixed?
And the answer is yes, because you said it, you're getting 6 to 8 inches of rainfall. Now, in the 1960s, about 1965, we had the big chunk of South Africa, Botswana, and Rhodesia in a terrible drought. And cattle were dying, wildlife was dying, government was paying drought relief aid. And I couldn't help but notice as a researcher, the exact same river, if you followed it down, its tributaries in those three countries, at the mouth of that river, the International Red Cross was collecting money for flood victims in Mozambique. Where the hell did that flood come from? It was our drought. And that's when I coined the words effective rainfall. New Mexico, Arizona, etc., they get the rainfall, but it's non-effective. In other words, it flows across the surface of the soil, or if it penetrates the soil, it evaporates out of the bare soil. So most of the soil just goes straight to floods or back to the atmosphere. Very little is retained in the soil to grow plant cover. That's what's happening. It's non-effectiveness of rainfall. So we did international trials. We established all this long, long ago. You can easily make that rainfall more effective. And when I was in New Mexico, I did simple calculations. But if we made something like 2 inches of the rainfall effective, in other words, got it to effectively stay in the soil, it would equal, I think it was 2 or 3, whatever it was, dams the size of Elephant Butte of new water every single year for the next century at no cost. Mm-hmm. Ranchers would earn increased profit to do it. Mm-hmm. Now, what did it cost to build reservoirs to get that amount of new water? It would cost trillions of dollars. I was working those calculations out with government officials and with ranchers in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. You just make the rainfall effective. That's all we need to. And we've established that and shown evidence, and I did in a TED Talk. It's old stuff now.
We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to continue on my conversation today with Allan Savory, and it's going to lead us first down the road of looking at what holistic management is from more of a 30,000-foot view. Stay with us. We'll be back after this, but now here's the captain, Tim O'Byrne, with more.
Hey everybody, Tim here. We're fixing to come up on 1 million downloads of our Working Ranch radio show podcast, which is really exciting. And it got me to thinking about another viral moment that we had back in 2017 when we ran a short Facebook video of the Safety Zone calf catchers. And it was so popular, it got 6.8 million views in the first 5 days. I want you folks to check it out, Safety Zone calf catchers. It's a great product for all producers. Keep you safe when you're working with baby calves, especially for old timers like me who maybe can't outrun those cows anymore. Check them out, Safety Zone calf catchers.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone calf catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone calf catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505 0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Geld V and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Geld V and Balancer influenced females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and had excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Make your crossbreeding count with Geld V and Balancer genetics.
Welcome back, as Allan Savory is our guest on the program today as we jump back into my recent conversation that I had with him. So then it brings us to the next element after realizing that livestock needs to be a part of the solution in this. And that
Must be.
Okay, must be. Okay. So let's then move to the other element that people would recognize you with, and that is the holistic management of that.
Okay, there are two aspects to this. One is livestock has to be used. Now, when I discovered that in the 1960s, nobody knew how. Every way people have ever run livestock, rotational, mob grazing, you name it, every way humans have run livestock for over 10,000 years had led to biodiversity loss, land degradation, and in seasonal rainfall to deserts. So we didn't know how to do it. I studied everything in range science. They had no solutions. Nobody had ever tackled it. I looked at other professions because I had limited resources as an independent scientist. And what I did was I hit on the military and said, well, how have they solved problems that ranchers have, ever-changing situations, unknown situations? And over 1,000 years, the military academies of Europe had solved that problem with a planning process where you don't try to deal with the complexity, you break it down into small components and you deal with them one at a time, and you come up with the best possible plan. So I adopted it, and that's why I credit Sandhurst Military Academy, and I developed what today is called holistic planned grazing. Now, that's based on 1,000 years of practice in military immediate battlefield conditions. I only had to adapt it to ranchers having to plan for a year or more in advance, not for a week of battle or 2 days of battle. So I did that, and I achieved it. Now, from when we started that on first 2 ranches in Rhodesia, I stress now, we have never, ever had a single failure in now something like 60 years. We have had thousands of ranchers fail to do it and say it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was the one thing. Now, we still hadn't solved the problem because, as I mentioned in the COP26 talk, humans are only managing 3 things. You're not really managing cattle. You're managing your family. And the first thing you have to do as a rancher is to finance your family. Same as a government agency, same as a political party, same as a university. The first thing you have to do is finance it. Otherwise, if you go broke, it doesn't matter what the hell you're doing. You can't support your family. So you manage your family, and then you manage the finances, and then you use cattle to produce food from nature, from grass, etc. Right? So we hadn't gotten on quite how to do that. So I was beginning to get some people that were failing, not because of the grass or the grazing, but because of economic issues or social issues. Even a divorce could lead to the failure of a ranch. Now, what the hell do you blame? Okay, so when I came to the United States as an exile, very bright, sharp, caring, far-minded people in the Soil Conservation Service talked to me and commissioned me over 2 years with a intergovernment agency of all the government agencies, commissioned me to put 2,000 academics and officials through training over 2 years. So we did that. Now, that was an incredible period of learning. And in that period, that's why I don't say I developed, we developed. 2,000 people good bureaucrats in America developed with me. The word holistic came in, and the framework whereby we could help any person or government manage humans, culture, society, organizations, as we do, that first have to finance themselves and then have to produce food from nature. And we learned how to do that. Those people, it's quoted in my textbook, acknowledged, they said, these are the exact words, you can read them. They said, we now recognize that unsound resource management is universal in the United States. That's an incredible statement, never been corrected. That's in the first edition of my textbook. Mm-hmm. Now, when that occurred, right, they were understanding why floods, droughts, landslides in California, they were now understanding how to diagnose them. Now, because organizations are complex and not human, they are organizations, they don't behave like a human. The consequence of that was the Forest Service was negotiating with us for me to train 18,000 Forest Service people. But the reaction in the second Reagan administration was a political appointee to the SCS to head it, close ties to Texas A&M and other universities in the dry states, and all future training was banned. So I think we just need to go back to what we knew how to do in the 1980s.
As we step in here and take another break, in my conversation with Allan Savory in this segment, he was mentioning that he was in the process of working with and training about 2,000 bureaucrats about holistic management. So when we come back, my question to him is, why is it then that we as ranchers often feel, not always, but in some cases, that the public lands are some of the worst managed lands in the country?
Support your cattle's health and productivity with Vigortone minerals. Since 1912, Vigortone has been a trusted name in animal nutrition. Our revitalized product line offers targeted nutrition for every stage of production and every region. Vigortone delivers consistent performance and simplifies your mineral decisions. Wherever you are, Vigortone works. Visit Vigortone.com to learn more.
Okay, so I want to go back to that. And you met with those 2,000 individuals working through this. And I realized you had said that there was some change in leadership in Washington, D.C., that then some of that stuff halted. Yet at the same time, we still see in the United States, at least, it would almost feel like if you were going to talk with a group of ranchers, they would say our government lands are the worst managed lands in the country.
Okay, so let's look at this and why only ranchers, I'm stressing this, only ranchers can provide a lead, and they're not doing it. And I have been saying this for 40 years, all right? So I'm going to repeat it. If you look at the land in the country, you've got some land that's just private ranches, totally private. Mm-hmm. You've got many ranches that are private, but it's a small piece of the land, and a major part of the land is leased from a government agency, state, federal, BLM, Forest Service, etc. So a large chunk of the land is government controlling the management. Right in that situation, and then you've also got some national parks in the country, and they are under the control and the management of the government agencies and the environmental organizations, not the private, not the ranchers. So when you look at this situation, all of that land, every category of that land in places like we mentioned, Nevada, New Mexico, etc., is desertifying and leading to increasing droughts, floods, etc. All right, so every category is. Now, people will never admit to error, as you learned with the TED Talk. I admitted to error when my research led wrongly to the government killing 40,000 elephants. Yep. Hundreds of people were involved, other scientists. Not a single one to this day has admitted error, because people don't like to, particularly professional people, and institutions almost never admit error. So when we've got all of this land deteriorating, you're not going to get environmental organizations, government organizations, universities, anybody to admit error. and that it's desertifying. So who can do so? Private ranchers. And they won't do so because they feel it's giving way to the criticism of environmentalists. They're the only people who can because they're individuals. Now, what I would love to see is a rancher with the leadership and the courage leading a cattlemen's organization to just stand up and say, oh my God, the environmentalists are right. Our land is deteriorating. But you know what? We notice yours is too. We notice that the BLM land, the Forest Service land, the national parks under you is deteriorating, and ours is. This is terrible for America. Let us get together and solve it. The only people who can take the lead are private ranchers, and they will not do it.
Okay, that was a good point there, Allan, and I think it takes us into maybe another direction to talk about in our conversation here this morning, and that is the view about climate change. And as you just said, ranchers are not doing it because they feel like if they do some of these things, they're giving in to the environmentalist perception on climate change. Now, so let's go there. An issue that we have in our industry is ranching industry not really wanting to say, and I'm kind of there too. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm like, well, I'm concerned about we need to be managing our land correctly, but at the same time, a lot of the push by extreme environmentalism on the extreme side that their view is, I don't agree with that. So meeting in the middle on this is really what you're saying. I mean, we need to do, but golly, that's a hard thing. And I guess I'm struggling just even to voice my question here to you on this, because I'm not necessarily wanting to give a lot of credence to environmentalists, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that I just not manage my land correctly.
Okay, you're saying that you're meeting in the middle is extremely difficult, and you're being honest. For you too, it's hard to give way to the environmentalists. That's what we've got. It's not about our damn egos. It's about the survival of humanity and civilization. We've got to rise above that. Now, the institutions will never say they're wrong. It's a feature of the institutions. So meeting in the middle ground is what we need to do. And only the private ranchers are the people who have the opportunity to bring that about rapidly. And they have not done it. My appeal to them is rise above egos, help the whole nation.
We're going to pause here, and next week we're going to continue where we left off. In fact, I've got enough audio in my conversation with Allan Savory that I think it'd probably take more than just next week's show as well. And I do want to share it with you because it's extremely thought-provoking. And I know sometimes for some of you it could be a little bit controversial. And if you haven't got it figured out yet, he is a firm believer that through the use of livestock that we can reverse what he considers to be a major global crisis, and that is desertification, which is leading to climate change. Next week, as we continue and pick up more about our conversation on climate change, we'll also be talking about fossil fuels, carbon capture programs, and much, much more. In fact, later on, we really get into the depths of truly what is holistic management. I know I was kind of surprised, so join us next week as we continue with more of my conversation with Allan Savory. Coming up next, join us as we're going to be talking with Mackenzie Burnett, who's the CEO and co-founder of Ambrook.
With rising feed costs and an increased focus on sustainability within the beef industry, feed efficiency is more than a buzzword. It's rapidly becoming a battle cry in an industry challenged to do more with less. By incorporating today's Limousine and Limflex genetics into your planned crossbreeding program, you can capitalize on the breed's inherent feed efficiency advantage and moderate cow size, while still banking the premiums paid for high-quality, high-yielding carcasses. That's two ways to profit instead of one. Let Limousine and Limflex deliver dollars to your bottom line. Limousine today, profit tomorrow.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. You know, in agriculture, a lot of times whenever folks get together, conversations usually get to the point about, well, what are you doing? And what are you doing when it comes to different aspects within our ranch businesses? Maybe it's animal management to animal health, whatever that may be, land management, infrastructure development. Of course, one of those that always comes up is your finances and accounting software. And in fact, if you remember back in December, Jordan Steele was on with me with Ranch Management Consultants, and I asked him that same question because it's something I hear about. It's something I want to know what other folks are using as well. One of them that he mentioned was Ambrook. So today I'm pleased to have with us on our show Mackenzie Burnett, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ambrook. And Mackenzie, good to have you here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Justin.
Well, I'm interested, and we'll get into it just a little bit later, more about the product, but because I think when it comes, as you and I were talking before we went on air, a lot of us in the ranching have books. I mean, we're really pushing. It's one of the things I push on our show is that we need to run our ranches like a business, which means we in today's modern technology, it's moving towards a way that can be computerized. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I think one of the things that's always tough is when we have books, making them fit agriculture. And that really was one of the fundamental things that started with you all, was really you have a foundation in agriculture, correct?
Yeah, I didn't grow up on a ranch, but my whole family, actually, both my parents and my older sister, they're plant health specialists at the USDA, so a little bit more on the science policy side. My older sister has a equestrian operation in Maryland. And so I kind of had this context of understanding how agriculture played in all of our lives, both domestically and internationally. And then when I went to college, I didn't think I was going to grow up and work in ag, I'll be honest. And then went to college, got really interested in tech, ended up building out some software companies. And then it was actually in grad school that I came back on my own terms to agriculture and ended up working somewhere in grad school that had a lot of farms and water rights in the Central Valley in California. And that was like my real exposure to the industry. Then I honestly just fell in love with it and decided that I wanted my next thing to figure out how to work in ag. And the skill set that I had was software. So I teamed up with two friends from college and honestly spent that whole summer afterwards talking to every farmer, academic, policymaker that I could about what the problems were in agriculture that software could help solve. Because I don't believe in software just for software's sake. And two things came up over and over again. The first thing was paperwork. It's just that people were like, there's so much paperwork to do when it comes to agriculture that has nothing to do with actually farming. And the second thing was, and was related, but it was finances and the books. And so kind of just started to solve a lot of problems as we saw them in ag. The first thing we did was we helped a lot of people apply for pandemic relief and just kind of navigate USDA paperwork, because that was something that I was familiar with from my parents, just all the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And like software is pretty good at helping people cut through bureaucracy. And so started there and then just kept on digging until we ran into the problem that we're solving today, which is helping people really, really reason about their business as a business, but not making it overly complicated to do that.
So when we look at our business, and there's several different accounting type softwares in the marketplace.
Yeah.
But what did you see that needed to happen for ranching or agriculture that was different than the pull off the shelf product that we see out there?
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of really great ag accounting software out there. A lot of it is just built for a desktop, right? It's desktop based. And I think the thing that we had seen, especially talking to a lot of younger producers or just in the era of the pandemic, which is that they needed to be able to work remotely. They wanted to be able to work with multiple different people on their operation. They wanted to have software that they could use on their phone as well as like on their computer. And so I think that's actually where we saw was that there was a lot of really great ag-specific software that was built for desktop, but not really ag-specific software that was built for the cloud, like multiple devices. And so that's sort of where we started to build. And then I think the second thing that we kind of saw as a need was that type of software that was also integrated payments. And so just the modern era of like being able to not just handle checks, but also be able to like with a click of a button on your phone, send off a bill or send off an invoice and understand how that interacts with your books. was something that a lot of people talked about as they wanted those to be integrated. They didn't want to have a lot of paperwork that was shuffling around or then having to go and manually input it into their home computer. And so those were the two of the pieces that we kind of saw. I think when it comes to ag specific or like what that means, really actually what I think ag needs, which is similar actually to a lot of more industrial operations, is that they're just multi P&L. Like you guys, they were just like figuring out the difference between, a stocker enterprise or a hay enterprise, right? Like, and a lot of folks often do custom delivery, for example, that's a whole other enterprise. And so being able to understand how all of that interplays together to, at the end of the day, understand like price per pound of something or price per head, that you actually like the cost per head that goes into everything at the end of the day is actually really complicated. Some operations probably should be running with CFOs, right? And so like it's a complicated business. And I think that a lot of our customers come to us feeling bad that they weren't able to figure this out. And we're like, no, this is like actually much more complex than even a lot of software companies, right? A lot of software companies, it's a single P&L business. You get a lot of investment, right? And you don't have to make ends meet at the end of the year every year. Like ranches out of the bat are multi-enterprise, have to tie through cash flow at the end of every year, right? You don't have the benefit of like venture investors for that market. And so it just becomes a much more complex business to run.
Two things that brought up some questions as you were answering that particular question, and I'll go through them. One was bill pay, and I want to talk about that a bit, but we'll go right on the heels of what you were talking about how you said a lot of times in a ranching business there are multiple P&Ls. That is absolutely one of the things, and I did see this when I got the tour of the software a few weeks ago, was that ability to really break it down by enterprise. Now, as we all know, you can be a software genius and you can figure that out probably on a lot of the different softwares that are available on the market. We'll agree to that. Everybody would. But the one thing is the ease of getting that set up and quickly going so you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I noticed that was something that I picked up pretty quick, because that definitely is something we have to know what our direct cost is per enterprise.
Absolutely. And it's not just per enterprise, right? It's per enterprise, per location, per project, per like grant source. It's like there's all sorts of reasons why like you might actually be tracking a lot of information out in spreadsheets or on a ledger or something like that for all sorts of different reasons. Per entity is a big one that we're working on. And I think that the doubling down on what you mentioned too, it's like you can do anything in Excel.
Yeah.
Like it is Excel is an amazing tool. And most people do not have time to figure out or time to maintain all of the data entry that you need to in order to have the level of accuracy you need to have real numbers at the end of the day. And that's actually where, like when I mentioned earlier that like I don't believe in software for software's sake, that's actually where I think software can do really great things, is if it reduces the amount of data entry and it increases the level of accuracy that you have when you're just doing your workflow. So like when you are paying a bill, when you are receiving an invoice, like when something hits your bank account, like all of that should be as much as possible automated. And we're in the era of AI. Like honestly, that a lot of that is real. Like I think there's a lot of hype about AI. The things that are real is that it genuinely makes workflows way, way, way easier to automate. And we're already seeing that in ways to integrate that in with what we're doing with Ambrook. But the future is only toward, ease of use for that type of data entry so that you can, at the end of the day, be able to access the level of complexity of analysis that you need.
I want to hit this just real briefly because it is something that physically, when I'm doing my chain of work at the time of the month where I'm paying bills and doing those kinds of things, trying to get to the point where I'm having to write less checks by hand or printed out on the computer.
Yeah.
That was one thing that caught my attention as well, is that ability to do that. Now, I realize my bank can do it, and that's what I'm able to do now. It's just that's one more element I've got to go into versus keeping it within the accounting software, what I saw with Ambrook.
Yeah, exactly. It's a one-stop shop. You can mail checks from it. You can deposit checks with your phone, into your what we call the wallet, which is just like a holding account basically. That's also FDIC insured, which also gives 1% APY, by the way, which is better than most checking accounts.
I noticed that too, that 1% return. Yep.
Like there is no reason with today's interest rates that anyone should not have their money sitting in any account working for you. Banks get that money. you should get that money too. And I think, just having everything be one-stop shop means that there is one less venue for errors and that there is one less venue for just a time suck.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I agree with that because I have misplaced a number and it's different in my accounting software than it was when it went to the bank. I get that. Understand that for sure. Mackenzie, we don't have a lot more time, but did I miss anything in terms of what I know you guys, as you're going through this, you're also continuing to build as you go too, some of the components to it. So I know that it's an evolving product that continues to go as well.
Yeah. And I think the thing that customers routinely tell us that they appreciate is that we listen. We genuinely do listen. We could not have built this. We did a 2-year pilot before we launched to market by just sitting and listening with customers who are willing to take an early bet on working with us. And we are always adding more features every week. It is just a really rapid, we're adding things based on what people say they like or they don't like and fixing things. Like that's really important to us. I think that's how you build really great software at the end of the day. I think the other piece is just why we're doing all of this, which is, I think we're a team that's distributed throughout the U.S. Some of us live in cities. Some of us live in rural areas. Some of us live in in between spaces in America. I think the most important thing that we care about is honestly building towards the future of American prosperity. That was a unifying mission that we had among my 2 other co-founders when we started was no matter what we did, we wanted to build software that made American businesses and American people better off in the long run. And I think that has been the through line in all of us, in why we're building accounting software, right? Is because we actually want to. I think today for a lot of American businesses, the short-term incentives are misaligned with their long-term incentives. And that is no fault of their own. It's because they're stuck in these short-term cycles of just trying to make ends meet. And so building software that actually gives you visibility into the future and makes capital work for you with, the 1% APY. These are all these little things add up to just want to build more prosperous and more profitable businesses so that the people behind those businesses can feel like they have a better future. So I don't know. I just wanted to leave us end with that. Yeah. That is a reason why my whole family works in public service. I am 100%. That is why I'm doing what I'm doing here. This is my version of public service.
Well, Mackenzie, thanks for joining us. I know if folks want more information, they can go to the website, ambrook.com as well, correct?
Yep, ambrook.com. Yep.
Well, good to have you on the show. I enjoyed the tour a few weeks ago of the product and enjoyed visiting with you here today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Justin.
You bet. Mackenzie Burnett, CEO and co-founder of Ambrook, joining us here on the program today. And I know we just kind of hit some of the main things the software can do that I think are probably really keys for a lot of us in the ranching industry. But there's probably other things that you might have some questions about. And their website, as we talked about just a bit ago, ambrook.com. And if you do /ranch, again, that's ambrook.com /ranch, you can take advantage of a 30-day free trial courtesy of us here at Workin' Ranch Radio. So check that out. And I don't know if you'd caught some other previous shows, I'd mentioned that their support is based right here in the United States. So if you go into their website and you can get into the support chat line there, they do one-on-one video training as well, group video training, email support, chat support, all through the website there. So check it out for yourself. Again, just one of these kind of topics that I know always comes up in the circles for us as ranchers is what are we using out there for software, for accounting software. Might help you out here a little bit today with some more information about Ambrook. We'll be back on the Workin' Ranch Radio Show after this.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Workin' Ranch Radio Land. Valentine's Day is coming up. Fast approaching, guys. This message is for you. So all you ranch women, you either tune out or give us a moment. All right, guys, here's the deal. You're thinking about a gift, and it's hard to get to town, and what does she really need anyway, right? Who the heck knows? They don't talk to us about stuff like that. But I did stumble upon something amazing the other day. This is going to be so cool. I don't think anybody else has done this or stumbled upon it, at least not in the cowboy world. I was talking to my lovely bride, Christine. We've been together 39 years now. And it just so happened she was doing something in her jewelry box. And I happened to be standing there, with a bucket of cheese balls crunching away. And I'm like, what's that? And she stopped, stood up straight, got a sparkle in her eye, turned to me with the sweetest look on her face. She said, well, that's a necklace that my nanny gave me. And it's really special to me. And then she put it back, and then she picked another piece up. There's like 150 pieces in there. And she said, and this is from and it went on and on. I'm sitting there just munching away on cheese balls and like acting like I'm really interested. And after about 5 or 10 of these, I'm actually really interested in what's in her jewelry box. That's the key, boys. Ask her for a walking tour of her jewelry box. And I tell you, you'll be the king for the rest of the year. It's my 2 cents. Back to you in the studio, Justin.
All right, thanks, Captain. Appreciate the advice there. And I might add, in plenty of time as well. We'll still yet a couple of weeks before we hit Valentine's Day. Well, turning now and taking a look at our long-term weather is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, one of the things I wanted you to explain a little bit, because you had said in your weather podcast this last week that we could start to see some atmospheric rivers. And I hadn't really heard of that terminology, so I want you to explain what you meant by that.
Well, yeah, some folks are using that term. It kind of replaces a term that I'm more familiar with, and maybe you are too. It used to be called the Pineapple Express.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so when you get a really strong jet stream that settles in across the Central Pacific, that stretches all the way back from north of Hawaii and goes on a straight line to the California coast, basically what you do is you get a feed of moisture that is very into like a narrow channel that gets directed off the Pacific into Western North America. And if you were to look at it on a satellite image, it would look like a river that kind of winds its way across the Eastern Pacific into the Western United States. And it takes kind of a certain pattern, a certain setup to develop, and they don't happen, very frequently, but when they do, they can transport a lot of water off the Pacific into Western North America. And we saw that in the winter of 2023. And we had several of those events, and that's what brought the really big precipitation to places like Tahoe and the southwestern United States. So this is something that is good news in the sense that it's going to bring a tremendous amount of water to the Sierra Nevada. They're going to need yardsticks to measure the snow here over the next week. And this will get into the Pacific Northwest and eventually the Northern Rockies. With the good comes bad. Sometimes you get too much rain, and that'll happen into some parts of Northern California. But the snowpack in that area could use a boost, and it will get one.
Yeah. Okay, so as we look out into, we're now in the month of February here, so let's look out into past about the 10th, because that is something that has kind of been marked on your calendar where we're starting to see some of the different models, whether it's, of course, you talk about the European model, U.S. model, the different models that are out there, not quite jiving together. And so talk about that uncertainty and what all the different models are showing.
Yeah, so if we rewind a little bit, the big Arctic outbreak we had in the month of January, and this January is the coldest since, depending on, we have to kind of add up all the numbers, but we ended the month. This is one of the coldest Januaries for the lower 48, going back to 1994, maybe 1998. So it's been a while since we had a January this cold. But other than the snow that hit the Gulf Coast, it really wasn't an Arctic wave that produced much snow. It obviously produced, and the reason for that, it was so dominant Arctic that the Pacific Ocean was cut off from supplying the heavier moisture that you need for bigger snow events. What's different now is that we are going to be looking at this. We just talked about the atmospheric river, the Pineapple Express. We're going to see another wave of very cold Arctic air build up in Canada early here this month and have the opportunity during the second week of February to move in, covering a lot of the lower 48 again. And it will be more centered in the central and western United States. It's going to get everybody, but with it shifting a little more westward, that's going to allow a little more Pacific influence. So there is a good possibility that the second week of February on into March, if we see this mixture of Arctic and Pacific, it's like gas and matches. It's going to produce a lot of weather. And we're seeing that already with this system coming into California.
And now we're, in that time frame, we would be getting into the point where, as you were saying, what we're seeing coming off of and into California in that area, a lot of moisture now in some of these storms when we look a little further out into February and into March.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be the big difference. And that's one reason the models are having trouble. When you have two different air masses kind of battling out on top of you, it's always gonna cause a lot of daily fluctuations in the model solutions. 1 minute it looks like, oh, this January thaw is going to go well into February 1 minute, and then you watch natural gas prices drop. Then the next model says Arctic wave, natural gas prices go up. I mean, it's whiplash with the models. So you always have to kind of stand back and make sure that you don't fall prey to a lot of social media weather, which will post, oh, look what the model says 1 minute, and then the next minute it's completely different. But the general trend, what we see developing after the 10th of February for a lot of the lower 48 and a lot of Canada is a return to some really cold wintry weather, and the likelihood with this Pacific influence now of the storms having more moisture, you'll have the opportunity for the storms to be producing more snow.
Okay. All right, Don. Well, I appreciate the update. That definitely is very helpful. I know a lot of folks there's a lot of folks calving, a lot of folks still to calve and yet to calve later on. I'm really fortunate when I hear weather forecasts like this that we don't calve until May with our cows, because by that time we may not be talking about the Arctic omega patterns that you have been talking about that are bringing these cold blasts into our country. So appreciate the update here today.
Sure thing.
All right. And you can catch meteorologist Don Day each and every morning through his daily video podcast. The link to that you can find right on his website at dayweather.com. Well, if you haven't yet completely finished reading through your January-February issue of Working Ranch magazine, you better get a move on it, because the next issue is going to be coming out before we know it. And if you're somebody that has never yet seen Working Ranch magazine, you can get a quick glimpse of what that magazine looks like by going to the website at workingranchmag.com. And not only you get there and see what it's about, but you can also subscribe from there as well. It's pretty simple, pretty easy to do. Quick thanks to our sponsors today: Ambrook Accounting software designed with the American rancher in mind, the American Gelbvieh Association, Safety Zone Calf Catcher, and the North American Limousine Foundation. Be sure to tune in next week as we continue on. My guest, Allan Savory, as I share with you my conversation with him, very thought-provoking and challenging in a lot of different ways. So be sure to tune in next week as we continue on with my conversation with Allan Savory. Well, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can do it by sending me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Tune in next week, same time, same place. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.